My name is Patty Bernard, and I am a member of the Nevada Women's History Project. Today is Friday, August 11th, 2017, and we are in Reno, Nevada. We are interviewing Fritsi Ericson, President, CEO, Emerita of the Nevada Women's Fund. This interview is a part of the Robert Z Hawkins grant that the Nevada Women's History Project received in November of 2016 to interview Nevada women. Thank you so much for interviewing with the Nevada Women's History Project. This is a grant that is dear to our hearts for Nevada women and their accomplishments. Can you talk a little bit about your formative years?
I sure will. And I want to thank you because this is a real privilege for me, and I think for all Nevada women, not only the Nevada Women's History Project, but all the women in Nevada that will be interviewed, and it will go on in perpetuity. It's just great, Patty. But my formative years were really fun. I was born in Reno, Nevada in 1938 to Gretchen Mock Hancock and my father, Melville D. Hancock, who was born in Fallon, and he went on to be a premier builder in this community and probably built more than 200 homes. And a lot of the building came about after World War II because there was all these men that were coming back from the war. And so he had a very prolific and interesting occupation. And my brother is John Hancock, and he is also in the contracting business and lives in Reno. So that was kind of, and I went to all my Reno schools. I went to Mount Rose Elementary, I went to B.D. Billinghurst, and I graduated from Reno High School, and then I attended the University of Nevada. I went first to the University of Colorado and then came back and finished up the University of Nevada with a degree in elementary education. In 1961, I married Harry Ericson, and I have a picture of myself with Harry that was taken at some gala that we attended, and we've been married for 56 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're really excited. This weekend is our anniversary. So that was pretty much what I was doing in high school. I was pretty active in high school. I enjoyed sports. I did a lot of sports before girls were encouraged to do so. And we did more intramural type sports, but I always enjoyed the sports. I was a member of Huskyettes, that was a marching group at Reno High School. And then I was also worthy advisor of the Mount Rose Rainbow Assembly. And that was an exciting time too. And it gave a lot of girls leadership experiences by going through an all-girl organization. So I have very fond memories of that period of time of my life.
Did you have a teacher that was outstanding in your educational career?
Well, I can remember a lot of them. I really can. In elementary school, I had Mrs. Figley. It was my fourth grade teacher, and that's when I decided I was going to become a teacher. One of my favorite teachers in high school was Blythe Bulmer, who at one time had aspirations to go to Hollywood, but she didn't go, but she ended up, she was my English teacher, and then she did a lot of little theater type productions in our community, and she was one of the best English teachers. Mr. Finch, who was the principal at Reno High School, was a little tough, but I think if you took classes from him, particularly when you were a senior, you were really headed in the right direction for college. So I can think of a lot of other teachers. I had some wonderful, wonderful teachers when in the elementary, middle school, and high schools here.
So the educational background for you really was quite good in Washoe County schools.
Oh, absolutely. I was thinking about how many young people out of my graduating class from Reno High School went on to college, and I'll bet that it was a vast majority of that graduating class that did go on and do university work and went on to become very successful in giving people in our community and other communities across the country.
So you married?
Yes, I did. I married, and Harry was a cross-country skier, and he was on the 1960 alternate cross-country team for the Olympics. And so we did a lot of skiing when we were first married. We had our children participated quite a bit until they figured out it was easier to take a chair up the hill and come down rather than have to walk across all that territory. But we had a lot of fun. And then he was injured quite severely in an airplane accident in 1972, and we had to give up skiing, so we went to sailboats. And our last sailing experience was we had a sailboat in San Francisco Bay, and we spent a lot of time and great family down there because a couple of our children also lived in San Francisco at the time. My children were getting to be older, a little bit older, and Lynn Atchison happened to live in my neighborhood. And Lynn came over one day and she said, you know, I think I'm going to work on a political campaign for Jim Santini, who I had also known in college. And she said, do you think you'd like to work on this? And I said, oh, that really sounds great with me. And so we started planning a variety of parties and activities, and we all got very involved in his campaign. And at about the same time, Mary Gojak was running for state senate. Sue Wagner was running for the assembly. And so there was a lot of political activity that was going on at that time. So it was very exciting to be involved in all that. So after Jim won his race, Lynn asked if I'd like to come into the Reno office and be a district assistant, and I said I'd love it. And so it was the Reno office, and we were there for that period of time, 1974 until 1980. And in 1980, Jim lost his job in a primary, and so, in the general election that year, the Senate race. And so we went home, and it was, wow, here we are. And so I spent a year or so kind of just off doing things with my family and enjoying friends, and then.
Let me take you back a little bit. In the office, what were some of your duties, and were there some memorable events that you remember from being in the office or out in the? Did you go out in the hinterland?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. We had a great office. There's no question about that. Lynn was there, and then we had Susan Lynn, who worked in our office, Kay Zanino, and a young man who came from Ely by the name of Jim Chachis, who still remains a good friend. He lives in Las Vegas, and he was the rural representative. And we just really enjoyed ourselves a lot. And I will say the congressman was very respectful of our office, of what we had to say and what we wanted to participate in, and the kind of legislation we were particularly interested in. And I chose women's issues. It was always something I was just interested in participating. And so that's where I really realized that there were so many women that were facing very tough times. There was spousal abuse, women who were having terrible times with divorces, who were trying to receive child support. A lot of husbands would leave. They had no way to go after their jobs, their salaries, or even their Social Security. There was nothing that could really help some of these women who were left high and dry and with children. And it really became, I guess, an obsession with me that I wanted to see something done about it, and we talked a lot about it with the congressman and with other people in Washington. And I will say one thing that just really blew me away one time, I was working with a naval assistant who was here and came to Reno to interview students who wanted to go to the Naval Academy. And so it was very early in the time that girls were admitted to the Naval Academy, and he came into the office and we were visiting about what we were going to talk to these young people about. And he sat there and looked me straight in the face and said, you know, women do not belong in the Navy. And I was just startled. I couldn't believe anyone would say that. He said they do not have the capability of participating in actual military work. They're not disciplined. And besides which, this will be interesting, we wear whites. And he was intimating that there is a problem with women and some of the things that happened to us during the month. And I just remember sitting there saying, I can't believe you would say that. But anyway, that's the way he was. And so we went ahead and we did have all the interviews, and it was quite an interesting experience. But our office we did do a lot of work. We had a lot of workshop type things, activities, when the congressman would come. And we would pick a topic that might be of interest to people in the community, and we'd try to pull them together, whether it was mining or if it was something to do with natural resources. And of course, his work was he did a lot with the Truckee River Water Compact, and so those were really his main interests. But he let us kind of handle other things if that's what we were particularly interested in. But I think that's what really drove me after we left the office to continue looking at things where I could help with women and children. And so that's really how I started off down that path. And then about the same time, nationally, ERA did not pass. And there were a lot of women who were very unhappy and upset about that. And as you probably know, it just passed the Nevada legislature this past session, and we'll have to thank them for that, but it's a little late. But anyway, that happened. And then there was the Ford Foundation report that said that less than 5% of all monies that are distributed by private and public foundations went to support women and girls projects. And I think it was just the turmoil of all that, of women experiencing these difficult times in their private lives, and then the fact that the money was not going to help take care of or investigate or help some of these women and children along. And so there were women that started looking at forming foundations to benefit women and children, or women and girls. And about that time, a woman from Boston who is a friend of Maya Miller's, and I know you've heard a lot about Maya Miller, who was a great philanthropist and a wonderful feminist, came to Reno to talk to Maya and Barbara Thornton and Frankie Sue Del Papa and Jan Evans and a number of other women about this foundation movement that was going on with a number of women across the country. And they thought that sounded like something we ought to take a look at. And they asked Lynn if she would be interested in, Lynn Atchison, if she would be interested in pulling together some women who might be interested in that kind of work. Not only philanthropic, and also then to do some grants that would benefit just women and girls. And she said, sure. And so she pulled together a number of women until we had about 35 on a board. And she asked me if I was interested, and I said, oh, definitely. This was something I was just really passionate about at that time. And I went on the board. I was a member of the founding board. And I did the first fundraiser with Jennifer Satry. Maya Miller and Barbara Thornton gave us enough money that we could have an office. So we had an office, we did a newsletter, we had a board, we had a part-time executive director, Jan Evans, and then Jennifer Satry and I did the first fundraiser, and we raised probably about $200,000 or $300,000 that very first year. And we gave 2 $500 scholarships, music scholarships in the springtime of that year, and we gave about $15,000 or $20,000 in grants in that very first year in 1983. And Jan Evans had some family difficulties to deal with, so she went back to school to work on a master's degree, and they asked me if I would come in on an interim basis, and then I had to be interviewed. And I was chosen to be the director in the following January, and I was there ever since. The year that Congressman Santini lost his job because he was not elected to the Senate, we closed the office, and then it was kind of looking around as to what I wanted to do now. I didn't think I wanted to go back into teaching. But I did think that it was important to do something in the field that interested me the most, and that was women and girls, and what was happening to them, and how we could make a better life for some of those women who were experiencing such terrible tragedies and difficulties. And so I just kept thinking about that, and then along came this opportunity where Barbara Thornton and Maya Miller and Frankie Sue Del Papa and Jan Evans and then Lynn Atchison and a number of other women decided that they wanted to form a foundation and look at trying to help some of these issues.
Then, what were some of the major problems that you faced as the CEO?
Oh, with the Women's Fund? Well, of course, at the very beginning, I'll never forget it. When we first were going to do our first major fundraiser, which was the Queen Isabella dinner, and we had a meeting of a number of people. We invited them to lunch. We could give them tickets. They could go back and sell in their companies or purchase themselves tables. And I remember a man saying, "If you women think this is going to work, you're crazy." And I thought that was a heck of a challenge, because we weren't crazy. We were very, very serious about what we were doing. And I remember a friend of mine who was at First National Bank at that time took his tickets back to the office, and he said, "These women mean business, and I think we need to support this." And it really made me feel so good that he would go and do that, because there were a lot of people who thought there was no way this was going to work. But I will say the reason why it did was because we had a foundation. We had some money to work with. We had about $20,000 in cash to begin with. And then we had a lot of very experienced women who could do a variety of things that we didn't have to pay for. In other words, we had someone who wrote our newsletter, and she was a volunteer. And we had somebody who designed our logo. She was volunteer. We had a lot of people who helped with mailings, who helped in the office. In fact, that's how I ended up, I think, being chosen for the job, was because I was willing to go, because I did have a lot of time and I could go into the office and help. So there was an awful lot of very talented, experienced women and some men who were willing to step up to the plate and say this was an important part of our community. And I think it's been that way ever since.
The Nevada Women's Fund is such an integral part of our community now. But I know that you were in other activities and you've had a whole lot of accomplishments. What are some of those that really stand out in your mind?
Well, as you know, in 1994, Jean Ford approached me about forming the Nevada Women's History Project. And it came from an idea that was, I think, in Washington, D.C. She brought some material to the office to talk to me about it. And she wanted to know if the Nevada Women's Fund would be interested in supporting this and if they could become part of the Nevada Women's Fund as a separate entity. And I thought it was a great idea. And so anyway, I did go to the board and ask them if they would take them on. At the time, we didn't have office space for them, but eventually we did, and so they were able to open the office with the office space they have now on Smith Ridge Drive, which was really great. But that was a lot of fun because it was starting a grassroots group all over again. I mean, the Nevada Women's Fund was grassroots. Nobody had done anything like it here before, and now you've got the Nevada Women's History Project. And that was grassroots and so different, and nothing anybody had done anything like that specifically for women. Another thing the Women's Fund did start was called Nevada Self-Employment Trust, and that again was a grassroots group of women who wanted to make mini loans to women, more entrepreneurs who were out in the community and were doing things but needed a small amount of money to get going. And they started with us also. So we had 3 organizations under our roof at one time. And it was really great to see these just different kinds of ways of helping women, and women getting involved and women being leaders and doing some significant things within this community. Those were things I'm very proud of. In addition to that, I did get involved with Rotary. I was among some of the earliest women to go into the downtown Rotary Club of Reno. As you may know, it was in the late 80s when the international organization decided that women needed a place at the table also, because it was a great place to network and be able to find out or have a lot of mutual business associations. And so I did join Rotary in 1994, and I'm still a member, an active member. I was chair of their foundation. They'd have a foundation for doing grants. I was chair of that at one time, and I'm still a member of their community project committee. I was chair of that at one time, but I remained on that committee, and it's really an exciting one. There again, it gives grants for youth who need help. It's really, that's where most of their grant money goes, for education, and some grants to assist youth at need. So that's been fun. And then I was also part of the Discovery Museum, which the Terry Lee Wells Discovery Museum, and I was on an early part of that. I was on their advisory board and was my husband and I made a $10,000 commitment over a period of time in order to help them get going, and we still support them financially. So those are some of the things that I've done and been involved. Oh, I was also very involved with AFP, which is the Association of Professional Fundraisers, and I was president of that at one time, and received my national certification from them, and I couldn't tell you the year, but it's been a while. But anyway, and they also honored me and gave me a Lifetime Achievement Award. I think they've only given 4 or 5, and that was really, really very special. The Women's Fund also honored me with a Lifetime Achievement Award when I retired, and I'm one of only 2 that they have chosen over a period of time. That could be how old I am, but we won't go there, will we? But we do try to. I think the Women's Fund does try to make the honorees that they choose over the years for the Hall of Fame that they do. It's primarily for a lifetime of service to the community and to women and girls.
Being the first woman, or not the first, but one of the first women in Rotary, which was an all-male group, were you treated a little bit differently as one of those first women?
Well, I don't know. It was very interesting. My sponsor was Bill Williams, who had been at St. Mary's for a long time, and I had known him. He was a fundraiser, and I'd known him a long time. And one of my friends, Raleigh Melton, who wrote a very nice column about me several times, and this is one of them that Raleigh wrote about me. But he was very welcoming. But I knew when I was there, the very first meeting I went to, Bill Williams took me to a table that was full of men, and because most of them were, and he said, "I'd like to introduce you to Fritsi Ericson," and I hadn't become a member yet, and because you go for a few times to get to know people. And this man looked at me and he said, "Well, do you realize how privileged you are to sit at this table?" And I went, "Privileged? Come on, it's a lunch." And it did shock me, I will say that. And there were some men, I remember one fellow I sat at a table, and he said, "I don't think that the government has the right to tell a private organization who their membership should be." And it didn't bother him, the fact that women had been held out for so long, and yet were doing the same kind of work these men were doing. It was a business organization. And he did have a lot of trouble with that. He's no longer in that Rotary Club, I know. But sometimes, and I just tried to ignore it, and I will say Raleigh Melton was so kind to me in many, many ways. And if I ever thought I was uncomfortable, I would just go find Raleigh or go sit with him, and I got over it. I mean, you just can't let that bother you. You just have to go on and do the best you can. And I think I've got many friends out of Rotary, many male friends that I really admire and respect, and spent a lot of time making sure that women were welcome. So now that Rotary Club is really wonderful. now, I think, about how they respect and want women to participate.
And are there more women in that group?
Yeah, there are probably not as many as there should be. I can't remember the statistics, if it's 25, 30% of the membership may be women now. But like many or many organizations like that, they're losing membership anyway, so it's hard to tell. But I think a number of women, the same number of women come in now as men, but there's still more men who were in the organization for a longer period of time.
What motivates you and keeps you going?
Well, I guess the things that I'm interested in, that I've seen so many changes happen. As I said, when I was with the congressman, and women would come in and they were desperate because they couldn't get child support, because they couldn't garner wages at that time. They couldn't garner Social Security and payments, and that's changed. Men would skip out and they couldn't find them. And I think a lot of that has changed. I think too that what was happening in violence against women and children was a huge issue in the late 80s and 70s, and now there are a lot of services for those women, and organizations such as the Committee to Aid Abused Women that exists in probably every state in the union in one form or another. And so many of those things that were so troubling to women and girls and their opportunities. I mean, Title IX hadn't happened yet for athletics, and so that made a big change in women's lives. And I do think that education now is doing a better job of encouraging young girls and girls to be directed into more into professions such as engineering, and now into the tech industry, where they're very lacking in numbers. That's, I think, one of the next big hurdles for women and girls, is that tech industry is still very much a male-driven industry. But I have a granddaughter who wants to be an engineer. She's a senior in high school, and that's where she's headed, either an engineering degree or architect. And she's said that since she was about 12 years old, and she sees nobody in her way if that's what she wants to do. That, to me, is very encouraging. And I think education is really trying to do a better job of making sure that girls do get educated in math and science and those fields where boys have done so well for so long.
So you are continuing then that path of working towards and for women through the Nevada Women's Fund. And
yes, I'm still active. I do with Women of Achievement, which is the major fundraiser in the springtime. I do the Hall of Fame for them, and I manage the Hall of Fame members, and it's something I'm very passionate about. And I do volunteer in a number of ways for the office if they need some help. And they just recently formed an alumni group that I belong to, and we meet now 3 or 4 times a year, and we're still trying to decide what exactly we're going to be when we grow up. But again, it's one of those grassroots kind of an organization to start out and see where it leads. So yes, I'm still very much involved in that, and I am involved in the Rotary Community Service Committee, because I am still concerned about the youth and how we make sure that we can help a lot of those who have been left behind.
were there any transformative experiences that you encountered as to where you are today? Did you have any epiphany on that changed the course of your life?
Well, I think something that really did change my life certainly was my experiences with the Nevada Women's Fund. I met a number of women I would have never known. I learned a lot about different kinds of organizations that women were participating in. I learned a lot about the needs and wants and desires of women and girls and children. And so that just changed the way I think it changed the way I think about everything. And in fact, I was talking to someone the other day about how I feel. Well, it was about a lot of problems that are going on in Washington today with health care, and now it's going to be tax reform, et cetera. And I said, I've just decided I'm a member of the village. And I really think that way. That's what we all need to be, as a member of the village, and seriously take on some of these problems and difficulties and help other people out. And I do think that came from all of the exposure I had with the Nevada Women's Fund.
Fritsi, how would you like to be remembered? Outside of, obviously, you're quite important in your family life, but how would you like to be remembered outside of your family, in your accomplishments and your life work so far? Because we know it's not over.
Well, first of all, I really would like to be remembered for my family and my commitment to my husband, to my children, to my grandchildren, because that's probably the most important part of your life that you have. But I do remember one time I was at a meeting with Reno executives, and I was asked a very similar question, and Roland Melton happened to put a quote in the newspaper that what I said. I said, "Today, lots of people get run over and left out. There is so much to be done by so many. Working together, we will make a difference." And I think that's probably true. If we really take it to that, if we really try and we work together and think through things and listen, that we can make a difference for this country and for all kinds of people.
And lastly, you certainly have spent a life with women. What would a message for a young woman be with your life experience and theirs just starting out?
Well, that last quote certainly would be one. But I think that to get as much education as you can, it doesn't matter if you graduate from a college or from a university, from a trade school, but at least make sure that you are learning all of the time and that you're passing all of that information and that you gather on to others, and that you just never stop learning. Because if you do, that's going to be the end of things. I just know it. You just have to, and have a lot of fun. I will say that. I belong to a group of women. There's about 32 of us now, and we're called Les Amis, the Friends, and we're all retired, and there were a lot of us. We've known each other for a variety of different reasons, and we came together as a group. And we do a lot of educational things. We go on excursions, and we've been to the university. We've been to the legislature. We've gone on just some fun things. We went on the Ghost Walk in Carson City. We have costume parties. We have tea parties. And we play bridge. We have book clubs. We do walks. But we're all together, and we support one another. If something goes wrong, we've had very serious illnesses, some deaths, and but in the long run, we just spend a lot of time supporting one another, and that has been really a joy in my life. So I just would tell young women they just must keep support, learning, and have fun.
So in closing, Fritsi, we certainly have asked some questions, but is there anything that I haven't asked that you think is important?
Well, people who know me know that one of the things I enjoy most of all is reading books. And I am they call me the bookkeeper. Well, I print the bookkeeper news for my Les Amis group and keep them informed about our book club meetings and what we will be reading and what we will be doing. But two books that I've loved over the years, one of them was West with the Night about Burl Markham, or by Burl Markham, and her flight across the ocean from west to east. And I have to tell kind of a funny story about that. I had that as in at a board meeting. Sometimes we would kind of have icebreaker type things, and so one time I had a number of fun questions about women, and one of the questions was, who was the woman who flew who was the first woman to fly the airplane from west to east. And of course, everyone said Amelia Earhart. And I said, no, that's not true. And a woman, I guess, I don't think I'll name her, but anyway, a woman just fought with me about this, and I said, no, it's not. It's Pearl Markham. And so that week in the San Francisco newspaper, there was a story about women in flight, and it said that Lindbergh had been the first woman to fly from west to east, and she called me up, and I mean, she really blistered me. Monday morning, there was a correction in the San Francisco Chronicle that said Pearl Markham had been the first woman to fly from west to east, and I called her up and I said, I'm going to send you this little article out of the San Francisco Chronicle. You have been corrected. But anyway, it's still one of my favorite books. I loved it. But another favorite book is by Ann Bale Howard, who was a member of the Nevada Women's Fund, and it's called The Long Campaign, and it is the story of Ann Martin when she was I believe she was the first woman to run for U.S. Senate in the state of Nevada. And it's a fascinating biography that Ann wrote. And Ann was on the Nevada Women's Fund Board of Directors. She's in our Hall of Fame, and she's one of she also started women's studies at the university in a closet. And along the line, Joe Crowley was kind enough to give her some additional space when she fought long and hard with him. But anyway, that's the book. That is one of the books that is one of my favorites.
One of my favorites also.
Isn't that funny?
And Anne is on the website with a biography.
Oh, good.
And also Maya Miller now.
Oh, that's terrific.
Maya's daughter actually
Kit did it?
finished the bio.
Yeah.
And that is, that's the way we're going to remember these people.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you so much for giving your time to us and sharing some of your insights.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure, and also it's fun to go back and look at some things that you forget happened in the past that you've done, and it brings back a lot of memories of some absolutely fabulous, fantastic women and men that I've gotten to know over the last 50, 60 years that I've been active in this field.